I'm Tobi Youssef. I am an international relations specialist at the Policy Center for the New South. It is a Moroccan think tank promoting Southern perspective of international relations and economics. I've been working there for 3 years as a researcher, and I'm focusing mainly on political governance in the Maghreb and the Sahel. My thinking and my research has led me to understand that when it comes to Maghrebi youth and sub-Saharan youth, what drives their radicalization process is poverty, exclusion, which derives from lack of education, from lack of healthcare, and from a state that is not answering their basic demands. When we look back at the 10 last years and the 10 last years history of radicalism and extremism, and when we see what happened in France, for instance, or what happened in Libya, I think there is one driver that is particularly important and that we are not talking about is geopolitics and the impact of geopolitics in group grievances. This is, I think, a driver that can be important and can be analyzed on the level of the European Union, because I think it has an impact and it's being disregarded. So when it comes to refugees and how for instance, the European Union has treated the crisis of refugees, we can say that, again, it has drove mass group grievances, especially in the South, because the European Union in its values defends human rights, it defends tolerance, and we can see a cognitive dissonance between what the European Union stands for and what the European Union do in its public policies. And this has hurt the image of the European Union, and this has drove group grievances among Maghreb countries and African countries. I'm leaning towards macro level and political and economical macro effects and factors of radicalization. But of course, on the community level, on the local level, there is some work to do. For now, we are not finding an evident link between COVID-19 and the rise of terrorist activity, but we are researching it in different aspects. For instance, what can be interesting is that one researcher is exploring the impact of COVID-19 on the doctrine of terrorist groups. So, for instance, terrorist groups in the Sahel are saying that COVID-19 is a benediction and it's a test for the faith, and COVID-19 is something that came from God, and that it's gonna ultimately help terrorist groups win the battle against whatever enemy they have. When it comes to PVE, CVE efforts of the European Union conducted this past few years, I think that we have seen an improvement, whereas we tend to think more about inclusivity, and we tend to think more about socioeconomic aspects of radicalization. And I think this is something that is quite positive for the global community to see. But what I can say is that more efforts should be dedicated to the local communities, to inclusivity, to economic prosperity, and to political good governance. And the monitoring aspect and the research aspect should come as a link and should come as an analytical tool, and it shouldn't be something that is prevalent. It should be something that is helping. It should be something that accompanies these efforts on the local front, and we should involve local communities, for instance, women and young people, when it comes to PVE and CVE efforts. Encouraging political consciousness and encouraging the spread of the state in remote regions can help for better prosperity and can help for better governance, and ultimately can drive young people away from radicalization and from these terrorist groups. The geopolitics of group grievances and how geopolitics of northern great powers can influence group grievances and radicalization is something that we have to take into account. These global geopolitical thinking can really help us think about radicalization as a common cause, and think about the Mediterranean as a global region. International aid should be more focused on that development aspect and link it to the security aspect. Because ultimately, if you have prosperous countries in the south, you will have less illegal immigration, you will have less radicalization. So this is something that we have to take into account, and that the European Union can take into account when it thinks about PVE and CVE efforts.